Hi everyone, Pastor Ruth here on this gorgeous Sunday. Weather is great outside, but I must say it's always a little tough on daylight savings to get up early, right? Well, today we are going to be continuing kind of in the same timeline as last week. We talked about David and Goliath. And it's such an exciting story because there's so much action in it, and there's an underdog and someone who, his own family thought he was unlikely to do great things, ended up becoming king and defeating Goliath and saving the Israelite army, all because he knew God was with him. And so we move from that exciting chapter in David's life, that crazy beginning, the crazy awesome origin story. And then now we're actually moving to one of David's sons. We're going to be talking about Solomon today. So David defeats Goliath. He eventually becomes king. He has to go through a lot of hardship to get there. If you haven't heard of the story or you're not quite sure what happens to David after Goliath, I want to encourage you to read it along with your parents or through the YouVersion Bible Kids app. There's some great stuff on there. You can learn awesome things about David. So through David's life, he had some tough things happen to him. He made some mistakes. And, life is just hard sometimes. And we end up having to make a lot of choices. And today we're going to be talking about choices and how we know what to do and what the right choices are. So before we get into Solomon's life after David, I wanted to ask you a question. How many choices do you think you make each day? It's probably a big number. Let's go down even further. How many choices have you had to make just today? Not even the rest of the day, just today. How about just this morning? How many choices did you have to make before you even got to breakfast this morning? We make a lot of choices in a day. We make a lot of choices in an hour. Some of them are easy or simple, like what color socks should I wear? That's not really going to impact anything, whether you wear red socks or blue socks or orange socks or white socks. It's not going to impact a whole lot. But some of the choices we have to make are bigger than that. Some of them have to do with our family or our friends or church, have to do with God, reading the Bible, things like that. There are some choices that seem really big and there are some choices that seem really small. And today we're going to talk about how Solomon had a pretty big choice to make. So David's king, we fast forward a little bit, and David was planning on building God a temple. Like a really cool, awesome temple. He had all the plans. It was going to be so extravagant, really cool. Like if you guys have ever been to like a really cool church. So downtown in Cleveland, there are some awesome churches. Like the building and the architecture, just crazy awesome. The stained glass windows are amazing. We just got our stained glass window here in the church fixed, I think within the last 2 months maybe. And so those things look awesome. And David was planning like this crazy awesome temple so that people could come and celebrate God and worship God. And it was going to be amazing. But David had made some mistakes in his life. And there have just been some choices David made. And God decided that he didn't want David to be the one to physically build the temple. He told David that his son would be the one to build the temple. So fast forward a little bit, and David's getting older, and typically one of his sons would take over. Well, one of them, not Solomon, a different son was trying to take over the kingdom and be king, and David didn't want him. David had chosen Solomon. And so even though Solomon was really young, David chose him to be king, and so he acted quickly, and all of a sudden this young Solomon is thrown into leadership and being the king. And I just want you guys to imagine for a second, let's say that you're just living life, you're a younger kid, you're in your teen years, or you're in your, middle school years or whatever, you're just younger. And you have older brothers, older siblings, and you assume that they're going to take over. And then all of a sudden, you're leading the kingdom and you're leading tons of people. And you're not even the oldest in your family. You're maybe not the most qualified as far as, knowledge and experience. Sounds kind of like our story about David from last week. He was the youngest in his family. He was underestimated. He didn't have all the knowledge and all the experience of everyone else. So Solomon is now put in this spot. And I want you to think, what is the very first thing you would do if you were in leadership? If you all of a sudden became the president of the United States, what's the very first thing you would do? There's lots of answers. I mean, there's lots of things you could do. You could make Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday a permanent weekend, and you only have school a couple days a week. You could make the school day 2 hours instead of 8. You could do all these things, right? There's so many things you could do. You could make a national ice cream for breakfast day, or any national holiday you wanted. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if presidents can make national holidays, but you get the idea. If you're all of a sudden thrown into leadership, and not just like a manager at a store, but like a king running a kingdom, I mean, there were tons of choices Solomon could have made. I mean, he had so many options. But actually, the very first thing Solomon did was he gathered all the leaders around him, and they went to the tabernacle so that they could seek God. They prayed to him, and Solomon actually offered tons of sacrifices and offerings to God. Like burnt offerings, tons of them, because he wanted to seek God. He made that his first choice, was to put God first and to take the leaders and just seek him, which is really cool. It's really cool. And so later that night, something incredible happens, and God comes to Solomon in a dream. And I'm not talking like, sometimes, we have crazy dreams. I have my fair share of crazy dreams, of things, just outlandish, crazy things that happen. But in this dream, God came to Solomon with something very interesting. He outright said this. I'm going to read this to you. It's in 2 Chronicles, and it's in chapter 1. And it's verse 7. It says, "That night God appeared to Solomon and said to him, 'Ask for whatever you want me to give you.'" So God appears to Solomon and he said, "Ask me, I will give you whatever you want." You sought me, you made your first choice was to follow after me and to seek me, and you went to the tabernacle and you offered offerings to me. I will give you whatever you want. Whew, that's a crazy choice. That's got literally every option. That's infinity options. Solomon could have said anything. I mean, if the most powerful being, God, came up to you and said, "Hey, I'll give you whatever you want. Anything you want." I mean, there's so many options. What do we want, right? If we're talking something small, like, man, I just kind of want to take a nap because it's daylight savings. But if we're talking something maybe a step above that, I'm thinking, man, a Nintendo Switch would be cool. Or maybe, we're thinking something even outside that, like a house, or I want to own my own roller coaster, or like, there are so many things. And Solomon, as king, I mean, he's this new young king. He could have asked for anything. What do you think Solomon could have asked for? I mean, there are a lot of things. Power. Could ask for strong armies that would never die. He could have asked for himself to be immortal or live 5 million years. But let's read what Solomon asks for. It's in verse 8. "Solomon answered God, 'You have shown great kindness to David, my father, and have made me king in his place. Now, Lord God, let your promise to my father David be confirmed, for you have made me king over a people who are as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me wisdom and knowledge, that I may lead this people, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?'" Give me wisdom and knowledge. Solomon could have asked for a lot of things. He could have asked for favor among the people, and for them to always blindly follow him no matter what. He could have asked for all of his enemies to be defeated. He could have asked for so many things, but he chose wisdom and knowledge. And not just wisdom and knowledge because he wanted to be the smartest person in the room, or because years down the road he wanted us talking about him and how he was the wisest king. But listen to this. He said he chose wisdom and knowledge because he's leading these great people, and he's young and he's new, and he wants to lead them well. He wants to do right by them. That's such a cool story from the Bible. I love it. And I know last week's was really exciting, and we were talking about David and underdogs and Goliath. But this one's just as exciting to me because it's someone putting God first and then looking around and putting other people first too. So if you remember a couple months ago, one of the big things that we talked about was how Jesus kind of boiled the 10 Commandments down to just two things, right? So first it went from the 10 Commandments, then it went to a bunch of all these other laws that were way more than 10, and then Jesus boiled it down to two. And he boiled it down to love God and love people. And this is a great example of that. Solomon put God first. By the very first thing he did as a king was seek God. And he went to the tabernacle and he brought all his leaders and they gave offerings to God and they were, seeking him first. And then God says, I'll give you whatever you want. And so he's loved God well. And then he could choose to love himself, to say, you know what, I deserve this. But instead, he looks at the people he's in charge of. He looks at the people of his nation and he says, I'm going to love them well. Please give me wisdom and knowledge so that I can lead them well. So that I can do right by them. So that I can have every tool available to help. That's an awesome story. I mean, I don't know that wisdom and knowledge would have been the first thing that came to my mind. I probably would have maybe thought a little bit harder. It would have taken me a long time before I got to wisdom and knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think maybe I would have asked for first. God, make sure my family is always safe. Make sure that, there's always going to be food on the table and a roof over our heads, and make sure that we're always going to be provided for. But Solomon's ask for wisdom and knowledge came out of a love and desire to help lead his people well. And so I really like this story. I hope you guys are, just as excited about it as me, because it's a great example of how to love God and how to love people. And wisdom and knowledge maybe doesn't seem that cool. It's not crazy strong ability. It's no superpower. But wisdom and knowledge can make all the difference when we're trying to decide what is the right choice to make. And one of the cool things is that when God is with us, he'll help us make the right choice, but we have to keep him involved in the process. Solomon had a lot of things he could have done when he first became king, but the very first thing he did was he went to God. He went to God to help him. And then he said, God, give me wisdom and knowledge for these choices that I'm going to have to make as king. And so I'm going to pray. And I'm just going to pray the same prayer, that we would have wisdom and knowledge as we go about this week on how to deal with friends at school, on how to deal with teachers who are giving us bad grades, or teachers who seem that they don't like us, or how to deal with real life situations. And so I'm just going to pray real quick, and then we'll head on out. Thank you guys for watching this. I know it may not be all the glitz and glam of the David and Goliath story, but I think it's just as important, and we can learn just as much from it. So dear God, thank you so much for every student and family who's watching this today. I just pray that wisdom and knowledge would be something that we could all gain. I just pray that as we go about this week with each step, we would keep you in the process for our big choices, even our little ones. That before we do big crazy things or smaller things, God, that we would remember you, and we remember how Solomon's very first thing he did was he went to you. And so when there are tough times in our life, God, I pray that instead of worrying about it, like Pastor Dan said last week, that we would just pray. We'd come to you and we'd include you in these decisions. I thank you for every student here. I pray that they would have a great rest of the week. And I just pray that wisdom and knowledge would come to each of us. And that every time we have a big choice to make, God, that we would include you in it. Amen. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. I'm excited to continue doing these videos for you guys. I know sometimes it's been a little sporadic, but I'm going to try to get more consistent with it, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week and that wisdom and knowledge increases for you.